Usually, tennis and respect go hand in hand, quite literally. But some players and crowds chose to disrespect the biggest legends of the game. Unsurprisingly, it very rarely works in their favor. After all, there's a reason that they're legends. If you've never heard of Gaston Gaudio, he was an Argentine tennis player whose greatest achievement in tennis was winning the 2004 French Open, the last one before the Nadal era officially began. His highest career ranking was number 5, but other than that victory, he never made it past the 4th round of a slam. He also holds the dubious honor of being the only player to ever get double bageled in the ATP Finals. Nadal and Gaudio met in the quarterfinals of Monte Carlo in April 2005 when Gaudio was one of the best clay court players on tour. Nadal was only 18. I wish I looked like Nadal at 18, but it was their 4th meeting, with Gaudio leading the head-to-head 3-0. Nadal got off to a flying start, breaking the Argentine, then holding serve to go 4-1 up. At the changeover, Gaudio then does this.
Early today, the touch at the moment has deserted him, so it's...
He tells Nadal to stop playing dummy and making faces. At this point, Nadal has celebrated long points, but not excessively. In my opinion, Gaudio is clearly trying to intimidate a younger opponent, making use of Nadal's inexperience. However, he picked the wrong man. Nadal barely responds. He doesn't get into an argument and doesn't lose his focus at all. He then goes on to demolish Gaudio, winning 10 of the next 12 games and bageling him in the second set. It really is a testament to Nadal's character that he doesn't fall into Gaudio's mind games at all. He stays composed, plays his own tennis, and comes out victorious. Nadal went on to win the tournament, his first ever Masters win, and beat Gaudio in their next 2 meetings just for good measure. I really don't like Gaudio's behavior here. It's cheap, and I'm very glad Nadal responded not with words but with actions, taking him apart piece by piece. In some ways, this really was the birth of the legend that is Rafael Nadal. One of the best villain stories in recent years, Daniil Medvedev against the US Open crowd. Grand Slam crowds can sometimes be very rowdy. At the French Open, they will raucously cheer for French players and boo their opposition. The Australian crowd cheered Medvedev's first serve faults in the final against Nadal, and the Wimbledon crowd That Serena Williams match against Heather Watson was crazy to watch. In 2019, Daniil Medvedev had one of the most entertaining runs in a Grand Slam ever. His battles with the crowd were legendary. Let's be clear here. Both Medvedev and the US Open crowd are definitely at fault here. Medvedev started receiving boos in his 3rd round match against Feliciano Lopez. He was brought his towel by a ball boy, but he threw it away childishly, before throwing his racket too, and the crowd took a big dislike to that action. In response to their ensuing boos, he proceeded to middle finger the crowd discreetly, but it was then shown on the big screen. The technique on that middle finger is very impressive. It's totally clear, but also away from the view of the umpire. He recently did it again to a rowdy Paris crowd, though he performed it in a different way. Back to the US Open, Medvedev ended up winning the match amid the boos and jeers, and celebrated in typical Medvedev fashion, basking in the boos. In the next round, he had another tough match against Dominik Koepfer. He once again then antagonized the crowd by dancing at the end of the match and encouraging boos before saying this at the end of the match.
And you guys, being against me, you gave me so much energy to win, thank you! Continue to give me this energy, you are the best, you are the best!
He then beat Wawrinka and Dimitrov to make it to his first ever Slam final. He then took Rafael Nadal all the way in an incredible 5-set thriller, but ultimately fell short. Afterwards, he delivered a lovely heartfelt speech where he paid tribute to Rafa and had a sweet moment with the crowd.
I can also change because I'm a human being, I can make mistakes, and again, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
In the face of adversity, Medvedev did what he needed to do to keep going. In this case, his response was to goad the crowd and then feed off their negative energy. It is almost the opposite case to Nadal. He deserved the disrespect from the crowd and then fueled it even more. However, his speech afterwards showed his better side. It was brilliant entertainment and blockbuster TV. Seriously, I was glued to the screen, and it was a very human performance from Medvedev. 2 years later, in 2021, Medvedev managed to make it to the final again against Novak Djokovic. This time, he made it all the way and managed to beat an off-color Djokovic in straight sets, even as the crowd jeered and booed during the match and even the championship point. Never change Daniil, I don't think he will anyway. Alex de Minaur and Novak Djokovic are not friends away from the tennis court. There has been some tension between the two since 2022, when de Minaur claimed that the Djokovic vaccination debacle was taking the spotlight away from the actual tennis at the Australian Open, despite the competition having not even started yet. The following year in 2023, he also had some comments to make about Djokovic's medical exemption.
Look, I just think it's just very interesting. That's all I'm going to say.
The Australian clearly thought that Djokovic was getting special treatment because of his status, and he wasn't happy about it, to say the least. Djokovic didn't like these comments or the fact that de Minaur was laughing about his situation. He took it as disrespect and responded by playing the best tennis. De Minaur is a very good player himself, but Djokovic made him look like he was barely a top 1,000 player, not a top 20 player. The 6-2, 6-1, 6-2 scoreline was emphatic, and I've rarely seen Djokovic play even that well. After the match, he delivered one of my favorite interview lines of all time.
I'm going to ask you why you beat him so convincingly.
Because I wanted to.
I love that you can see him, think of the answer, hesitate whether to say it or not, and then say it with a laugh. Classic Novak. De Minaur also made a pretty clear claim that Djokovic was faking his injuries.
Playing him, I thought he was moving pretty well. I don't know.
Do you think de Minaur was disrespectful with his comments, or were they fair? In tennis, it's a sign of respect from the crowd to not intervene or shout during the match. This is particularly true of someone's family or coaching staff, but it's a sign of respect that Djokovic's family did not extend to Roger Federer. Let's go back to the Monte Carlo Masters once again, this time in 2008. Federer is facing a young Novak who won his first slam a few months before. It's 3-2 in the first set, and a Djokovic shot gets called out on the baseline. Djokovic's family called to tell him to challenge the call, which they are not allowed to do. Roger responded like this.
Be quiet.
It's a brilliant response from Roger, especially as he wipes away the mark straight away to indicate that the point should be replayed. There was certainly no love lost between Federer and the Djokovic family around this time, and Djokovic's family had a bad reputation already. It's very rude to shout out during a tennis match, hence Federer's reaction. He also only tells them to be quiet. He doesn't tell them to shut up, unlike some of his other compatriots on the tour.
Shut the up there.
Thankfully, there is now nothing but respect between Federer and Djokovic, but Roger wasn't always Nole's biggest fan. Lucas Rossol's shot to fame was when he defeated Rafael Nadal in 2012 at Wimbledon. Rossol played one of the matches of his life on that occasion and deserved the win. 2 years later, they met again at the very same tournament. If you've watched Rafa play, then you'll know that he's pretty obsessive about some stuff. He always does the same thing before he serves, including scratching his bum, my personal favorite tick, and he always positions his water bottles in a certain way. Rossol took advantage of this to try to throw off his opponent's routine and knocked over one of his water bottles. He had also tried to throw Nadal off again a year before at the Qatar Open by moving around and making noise as Nadal served. What do you think of this behavior? Is it fair game, and is it expected that you should put your opponent off as much as possible? Personally, I think you should try to put your opponent off during tennis points and not outside of them. Nadal didn't let himself get put off. He managed to dispatch Rossol in 4 sets, much to the extreme joy of Tony Nadal, who said afterwards that he really didn't want Rafa to lose to Rossol ever again. A year later, Rossol and Nadal met again in Basel. Rossol went up 6-1 in less than half an hour and went up a break in the second set. Nadal looked off the pace a bit, but at 5-4, 30-love down on Rossol's serve, Nadal managed to start his comeback. Drawing on invisible strength, Nadal brought out some great tennis and broke his old foe twice in a row, winning 7-5 in the second set. Once again, Rossol took to unsportsmanlike conduct to try and undermine Nadal, this time smacking his racket on the floor as Nadal was about to serve. This time, it did have an effect, as Nadal complained to the umpire, but the umpire was uninterested. Rossol did manage to get under his skin, breaking the Spaniard back after being down 4-2. The match went to a third set tiebreak, one that Rafa and his uncle were desperate to win. Rafa managed to regain his composure and play some of his best tennis in that tiebreak. I forgot to mention that Rafa was also returning from injury in this match. When the pair met again later on in the year, Nadal easily won that encounter 6-2, 6-2. That is Nadal's go-to response for disrespect: put your head down and do your talking on the court. That was the last meeting between the two, but it wasn't the only time that Rossol riled up a tennis legend. Rossol again. Man, does this guy ever learn? This match actually took place before the Basel match between Nadal and Rossol. In the clay court season of 2015, it was Andy Murray's turn to face the Czech, this time in Munich. It looked like smooth sailing for Murray, who broke Rossol and went up 4-1. However, Rosol started playing some great tennis and managed to win 5 games in a row to actually take the first set. Early in the second, tempers flared. Rosol intentionally bumped into Murray on a change of ends and then didn't apologize. That wasn't the first time that Rosol allegedly did that, as other players had previously complained about his unpleasant behavior on court. Murray then reminds Rosol of that with this mean but funny line. Murray is definitely no saint on the court, but this moment does make me laugh. Rosol seems to continuously go out of his way to find ways to annoy and disrespect other players. It also turned out to be the motivation that Murray needed. He won the next 2 sets comfortably, 6-2, 6-3, and knocked Rosol out of the tournament. Harder than Rosol knocked into him, for good measure. The now 38-year-old Lucas Rosol is still a professional tennis player, but he's dropped down to 839th in the world. It's all but impossible, but I would love to see one more Rosol versus Nadal match just for old time's sake. While Rosol was definitely unsportsmanlike, it was also very entertaining to watch. Do you think there should be a bit more trash talking in tennis? It's always fun to have a villain to root against, or for, depending on how much you like them, until a player goes too far and gets utterly embarrassed, kinda like what Novak did to the players in this video right here.